of people might be saying that No Light Rail Virginia Beach is an anti-progress, anti-transportation group, or that we're somehow opposed to economic development. Nothing could be further from the truth, so we wanted to take a few minutes to explain what we're about, what we're trying to do, and finally, what we're for. For those of you who might be new to Hampton Roads, light rail has been an issue for decades and was defeated in a voter referendum back in the 1990s. But as our roads became more congested from new development and suburban sprawl, it became clear that we were going to have to do something about transportation problems in our area. Every resident in every city of Hampton Roads can probably tell you about some traffic nightmare they face on their daily commute to and from work, with most of these issues focused around our major traffic choke points on our bridges, tunnels, and interstates. There have been times when one accident or one breakdown in the wrong place at the wrong time has paralyzed traffic for hours. Yeah, we've all been there. Many people see light rail as a potential solution to some of these traffic problems and the first step towards a regional transportation system. We appreciate that sentiment, but a quick look at a map of Hampton Road's traffic problem areas, compared against where a potential light rail system would extend, you'll see that light rail wouldn't have much of an impact on some of our most severe traffic choke points. Even if light rail does go forward in Virginia Beach, commuters will still be sitting in traffic jams at these problem areas throughout Hampton Roads for many years to come. Some are making the argument that light rail will support and help promote transit-oriented development along the light rail corridor, and plans are already in the works for strategic growth areas all along the potential light rail extension. It's claimed that this can increase population density, stimulate economic growth, as well as increasing the tax base in Virginia Beach. The part of the equation left out of the debate is, light rail won't help any of these new residents go to or from work or help any new customers get to and from potential new businesses in the strategic growth areas unless they're going east or west. While light rail may help a few people in and out of the new strategic growth areas, the increased density will add more traffic to our major north-south corridors that are already at or fast approaching their capacity. And let's not forget this. These new businesses and potential residents will need things from the city government like police protection, fire protection, and if the new residents have children, we will need more schools, more school buses, and more teachers to educate them. Those things will cost money too, and there's no guarantee that development associated with light rail will cover these costs. As with every city budget recently that's come forth, there's been more spending than tax revenue. Virginia Beach taxpayers get to make up the difference in higher property taxes and fees for services. Then there's this to consider. Man, this is going to be an expensive project, not only to build, but to maintain and operate from now until forever. In a recent Virginian Pilot op-ed piece, Virginia Beach City Councilman Jim Wood stated that transportation costs paid by the City of Virginia Beach to Hampton Roads Transit would increase approximately $2 million, while pointing out that much of these costs would be covered by local, state, and federal tax subsidies. But this doesn't include the city's share of construction costs and the interest we, the taxpayers, would have to pay in order to borrow the funds necessary for construction.
Attack speed. Attack speed!
Hampton Roads Transit has estimated that extending light rail from Newtown Road to Town Center will cost over $300 million. But they're quick to point out that this figure includes cost contingencies that most of us call cost overruns. Even Virginia Beach Assistant City Manager Dave Hansen said in a Virginian Pilot story that Virginia Beach taxpayers would be responsible for any cost overruns. More on that in a second. Of course, most people have heard that the Commonwealth of Virginia has offered over $150 million to help defray the cost of extending light rail into Virginia Beach. But whatever that money doesn't cover, be it $1 million, $10 million, $20 or $30 million, I think you know who's going to be getting the bill. But even Aubrey Lane, the Secretary of Transportation for Virginia, as well as the editorial board of the Virginian Pilot, is on record as saying light rail won't ease traffic congestion. You know, that's an awful lot of transportation money to spend when it won't address one of the biggest issues we have in Hampton Roads, congestion. So let's talk about cost overruns. We all know about cost overruns brought to us by light rail, don't we? HRT had so many of them on the first leg of light rail, they needed 2 sets of books to keep track of them. One set they showed to the Federal Transit Authority, the other they kept for themselves. Even the Virginian Pilot reported that many government and HRT officials knew about this practice and kept silent. So for most people, what would be called fraud, and is usually a felony, no one went to jail. When local officials had decided they'd had enough of the problems at HRT under Michael Towns, they brought him in for some questions, and it was reported in our local media our elected leaders were not at all happy with his answers.
What you just said is one of the most insanely idiotic things I have ever heard. At no point in your rambling, incoherent response were you even close to anything that could be considered a rational thought.
When it was all said and done, what now former HRT CEO Michael Towns got was a pretty sweet golden parachute worth about $300,000 of taxpayer money as he was pushed out the door.
Treasure bath! I'm going to have a treasure bath! Treasure bath! Treasure bath!
In most cases, keeping two sets of books to conceal information from a government agency doesn't end well for an everyday citizen. Can you imagine what would happen if you ran a business and deliberately kept two sets of books to conceal information from the federal government?
That's the sound of the police! That's the sound of the beast!
But in HRT's defense, after Towns was gone, HRT finally did something smart and brought in Phil Chiquette to take over this mismanaged project and paid him $40,000 a month to get the Tide on track and moving people.
Treasure bath! I'm going to have a treasure bath! Treasure bath! Treasure bath!
Everybody loves a treasure bath, I know I do. But hey, don't blame Phil Chiquette. If you had a chance to make 40 G's a month just for cleaning up someone else's mess, would you take their money? So would I. But if HRT was offering that kind of money, there must have been some serious problems. So you would think that after all this and delivering the Tide a year late and 30% over initial estimates, HRT would have caught on to the novel idea about being fiscally responsible. But HRT still wasn't done spending our money on their mistakes. One of the most expensive mistakes was the light rail station at Norfolk State University. Because then Norfolk State University President Carolyn Myers didn't want to be disturbed in her university-provided home by light rail or have those nosy light rail passengers peeking into her backyard, taxpayers were forced to pay to move the Norfolk State University platform elsewhere, and HRT put the access to the platform on the wrong side of Brambleton Avenue. A couple of close calls because students were dashing across a busy road, $30,000 for a fence that didn't stop them, and a $1.8 million project to add stairs and an elevator to the platform on the east side of Brambleton Avenue. HRT officials threw a taxpayer-funded party to celebrate nearly $10 million in cost overruns just to make Carolyn Myers happy. Too bad she's no longer the president of Norfolk State University. Of course, using HRT's logic, now that Myers is gone and the project is finished, they'll probably blow another $10 million to put the platform back where they originally planned it. Those guys at HRT could probably make a river run in the wrong direction. But it does raise one important question. What if an influential member of the community decided they didn't like some aspect of extending the Tide to Virginia Beach? Would HRT or the city of Virginia Beach spend millions of our taxpayer dollars just to placate one person?
It's just so ridiculous.
History seems to indicate they would, because the precedent has already been set. It might sound crazy, but some of the things that have actually happened with light rail makes a crazy question sound downright reasonable. So after the Tide finally opened and started moving people around Norfolk, some folks decided that Norfolk couldn't have this nice new train and keep it all to themselves. Back in 2012, two groups were lobbying for a referendum on light rail. One was a group called Light Rail Now, and the other was Move Hampton Roads, a political action committee with some very generous donors. Some of the donations made to Move Hampton Roads were, in a word, staggering. One local healthcare provider donated $25,000 to Move Hampton Roads, which might be at least one reason why getting an aspirin during a hospital stay can cost so much. Together, these groups raised over $500,000 to promote a yes vote on this referendum and told everyone it was to study bringing light rail to Virginia Beach. So they began the effort to have a ballot question placed on the November 2012 referendum that read, should the City Council adopt an ordinance approving the use of all reasonable efforts to support the financing and development of the Tide light rail into Virginia Beach? Of course, the key words in this question are reasonable efforts. That's a pretty subjective term and can be defined many different ways. Some people might think it's reasonable to keep two sets of books. Some people might think it's reasonable to have outrageous cost overruns. Some people might think it's reasonable to pay over $6 per passenger to subsidize light rail. Some people might think it's reasonable to add to our city's debt that a taxpayer is responsible to cover. But what it's really asking is, should others who don't live your life or know your situation be able to decide how much more you can afford to pay for this project before they even know the final cost themselves? With the initial success of the Tide and probably a little bit of envy, Move Hampton Roads and Light Rail Now were able to convince enough people to vote yes to study light rail. Study light rail, not go forward with the project at all costs.
Yes! Yes! Yes!
So you can imagine everyone's surprise when Virginia Beach started looking into a proposal to actually buy 4 light rail cars, and these trains run about $5 million apiece. But wait a minute. Why are we even looking at buying light rail cars when we haven't even finished any of the studies or started construction of a track to anywhere? That's like buying a washing machine for a house with no running water. As it happens, these light rail cars weren't properly equipped for our system, so the deal fell through. But it does point out something very important. If all the 2012 ballot authorized council to do was study light rail, spending millions of dollars on light rail cars looks an awful lot like committing to light rail, and that's not what the voters approved. Whether or not we actually bought the cars, it does look an awful lot like our city leaders are pushing light rail at any cost. Now light rail supporters will tell you this is another step in building a regional transportation system. It gives people choices in transportation, and hey, it spurs economic growth along the light rail corridor, and besides, the millennial generation wants it.
I want it all. I want it all. I want it all. And I want it now.
Has anyone bothered to tell the millennials about that $20 trillion national debt we're leaving them to deal with? Just because we might think light rail is a good idea today, it doesn't mean it will be a good idea 20 or 30 years from now. And besides, what kind of future can the kids of today have if we're leaving them all this public debt to pay back? We also need to consider that as the years pass, expanding the system will become more expensive, and who can say what our economy will be like in 20 or 30 years?
Once I built a railroad, now it's done. Brother, can you spare a dime?
In the meantime, what they keep forgetting to tell you is, someone, the taxpayers, are going to have to foot the bill for all these wonderful things, and in case you haven't noticed, living in Virginia Beach is becoming a very expensive proposition. Between increasing fees on utilities, increasing property taxes, trash fees, and a scaling back of the real estate tax relief program for our senior citizens, higher taxes to either fund the construction of light rail or support its everyday operations at a time when personal incomes aren't keeping pace with the cost of living just isn't the best thing that could happen right now.
Ramming speed. Ramming speed!
Look, we're not saying development is a bad thing. We want to expand our economy, we want new jobs, and we want to see a bright future for our city. But what we don't want is to see the tax burden of Virginia Beach taxpayers increased for a train that isn't going to move a lot of people very far, it isn't going to ease traffic congestion, or do much to help anyone that doesn't live near the light rail line. So what's No Light Rail Virginia Beach really all about? It's simple. Now that we're starting to see much more clearly than anyone could back in 2012 how much this project could potentially cost, we think taxpayers, the people who'll be made to pay for it, deserve to have a more direct say in this debate by placing this question on the November 2016 ballot. Should the City Council of Virginia Beach spend local funds to extend light rail from Norfolk to Town Center in Virginia Beach? That's a pretty easy, straightforward question to answer. Do you, Mr. and Mrs. Taxpayer, want any of the taxes you pay to the City of Virginia Beach spent to bring light rail 3 miles from Newtown Road to Town Center? As with the 2012 referendum, ours will be a non-binding advisory vote only, and however it turns out, City Council can do as they please. It is our obligation as taxpayers and voters to hold our elected leaders' feet to the fire, find out where they stand on light rail, and then choose whether or not they deserve to be re-elected. We can't afford to let our elected leaders hide behind carefully crafted statements to allow them to give anything but a simple yes or no answer. Of course, another argument could be made that if an elected leader is voting to spend taxpayer dollars to study light rail, then they do support it and might not deserve another term on City Council. But that decision rests with you, the voter. Do we have opposition? Oh yes, we do. Nice to see you guys again. Many of those who supported light rail are understandably upset. We are, after all, seeking to overturn the results of the vote they won in 2012. In fact, a recent email from Lead Hampton Roads, a project of the Hampton Roads Chamber of Commerce, stated that another vote on light rail was unnecessary and inappropriate. Unnecessary and inappropriate?
Wrong!
Who would have ever thought that anyone would ever think that asking people to vote on something our government is planning to do with our tax dollars would be unnecessary and inappropriate? We think that voting is one of the most necessary and appropriate things any citizen can do, as well as exercising the right to petition our government for grievances, but that's just our opinion, which happens to be backed up by the First Amendment of the Constitution.
The First Amendment. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion, or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech, or of the press, or the right of the people peaceably to assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances.
Of course, light rail supporters oppose another vote on the subject because with some of the reports about the projected costs surrounding light rail, the disappointing ridership numbers, and the never-ending problems at HRT, as well as facing an organized opposition, that's us, they're smart enough to realize they might not be able to sell light rail to the voters this time around. But wait a minute. If the majority of voters actually are in favor of light rail, our opponents shouldn't have anything to be afraid of, should they?
Are you shook up? Are you nervous? Sir, I am, sir!
Some might say, you're against light rail and giving people choices. You know, it's a pretty weak argument to attack others based on what they oppose, because it requires facts, not emotion to win a debate. But we'll be happy to tell you what we're for. We're for government using our tax dollars wisely. We're for giving taxpayers every opportunity to peacefully stop our government from overspending through the ballot box. We're for holding our elected leaders accountable to the people they serve. And we're for giving people more information about important decisions like light rail, not just selling the hype and ignoring the costs. Look, we know that public transportation services such as Hampton Roads Transit never ever turn a profit. They will always be supported by taxpayer dollars. And that's just a fact of life. Besides that, if light rail was ever going to be profitable, the private sector would already be spending their money to build it, rather than giving their money to political action groups in the hopes of pressuring government to hand the bill for light rail to taxpayers. So shouldn't those same taxpayers have every opportunity to have a say in what that level of commitment will be? But consider this, if just 29 donors are willing to contribute nearly $500,000 to a local, single-issue political action committee, that should give you a pretty good idea of what we're up against. Our opponents couldn't say with any degree of certainty what light rail would have cost back in 2012. All they could do was tell us how wonderful light rail would be for the economy, how many jobs it would provide, and all they wanted to do was study it. And here's the result of one of those studies. A recent report to Virginia Beach City Council by Deputy City Manager Dave Hansen, called Virginia Beach Light Rail Extension to Town Center Update, released on September 1st of 2015, stated that because there are no federal funds being used, the City of Virginia Beach plans to save money by purchasing steel from sources outside the United States, and we all remember what great deals we got on drywall from China. The City of Virginia Beach also plans to save money because they can legally circumvent the Davis-Bacon Act. The Davis-Bacon Act was a law passed in 1931 that establishes the requirement for paying local prevailing wages on public work projects for laborers and mechanics. This means that the City of Virginia Beach has every intention to pay construction wages that are less than current industry standards. According to Mr. Hansen's report, the city would save over $14 million by intentionally deflating the wages of the working men and women who would construct this project.
How many of you right now work 2 jobs just to have enough money to be broke?
And by the way, Assistant City Manager in Virginia Beach makes over $150,000 a year. Just thought we'd like to include that. But by circumventing the Davis-Bacon Act, the cost savings for labor alone would be more than double the savings of buying materials from foreign suppliers. What could be more American than that? The reason this issue is important is because no matter where you live in Virginia Beach, light rail will have a direct impact on your everyday life. If we spend too much or take on too much debt to build this project, vital city services like police, fire departments, and public schools could face funding challenges in future budgets. Whether it's the costs associated with everyday operations of light rail or simply paying back the money we borrowed to build the project, that bill will eventually find its way to an already overburdened taxpayer. So what can you do about this big decision?
I want you to get up right now and go to the window, open it, and stick your head out and yell, "I'm as mad as hell, and I'm not going to take this anymore!"
Okay, you don't need to go that far. But you can sign our petition and get our referendum question on the November 2016 ballot. That would be a great place to start. You can attend local city council meetings to express your opinions about light rail during the open forums. Well, it won't get that crazy, but please remember to be polite to our elected leaders as well as to our opponents. They're people too. Next, you can call your city council members and ask them point blank, where do they stand on light rail? Are they for it or against it? You can seek to inform yourself about the issue of light rail by visiting our website, NoLightRailVirginiaBeach.com. There you'll find a lot of information about the history of light rail, the problems it's had, and what it's cost taxpayers so far. You can also sign up for our email alerts or share the information we have with your friends via social media. The next thing you can do is volunteer to join our organization and help us gather signatures for our petition. It's easy to do, and if you could get just 10 or 20 signatures, that would be a big help. Finally, you can make a contribution towards our cause. Our opponents were able to raise hundreds of thousands of dollars from special interest groups that favor light rail for their own reasons. Our donations are closer to $25 and the $50 level, so if you could help us out, we'd appreciate your support. This really is a David and Goliath struggle. Look, we understand that getting involved in these local issues can be tiresome. Everyone just wants to do their job, raise their family, and enjoy the fruits of their own labor. We get that. With the presidential election already kicking into high gear, it's easier than ever to tune these things out and ignore what's going on closer to home.
Hold it. That's it. I can't take it no more. I feel like I just gave birth to an accountant.
But this opportunity could be the last chance we have to remind our city leaders what our priorities are regarding light rail and how you want them to manage the money we all have to send them. On the other hand, if you're lulled into apathy, chances are you'll get the exact outcome you didn't want, but by then it's too late. That's why it's so important to get this measure on the November 2016 ballot. Thank you for taking the time to watch this video, and we hope you'll cruise on over and pay us a visit at NoLightRailVirginiaBeach.com. I'm Jimmy Frost. Have a great day.